Hey everyone, Scott Norris here from Virtualize Me. Now with VMware just over, some great announcements, but I wanted to actually track back and do another video on what is now vRealize Automation Cloud, formerly known as Cloud Automation Services. So I did a video, I think it was maybe VMware last year, when it went initial availability, I believe, or maybe a bit after that, that went through all the things. Now I wanted to do that again because being a SaaS product, it's had a lot of changes over that time, and also, with VRA 8 coming around the corner, this is pretty much what that's going to look like, right? But just an on-prem version. So let's have a look and go through the Cloud Assembly. Let's just stick with Cloud Assembly for this video. So first off, we want cloud accounts, right? So as of today, we've got AWS, Azure, GCP, NSX-T and V, VMC on AWS or a vCenter endpoint, right? My current cloud accounts, I've got these. NSX-T is linked to vCenter. Now with AWS, you're entering your access ID, your secret, you're choosing which region you want to go to. I'm only going to one. Then we do these capability tags. Now for those who haven't seen my previous video, capability tags are hugely important. So these are how we determine where a workload goes. Now, what's great about capability tags is that they can meet your business rules. Why this one, I've got platform AWS, is very, very specific, but you can think about, well, you could have location, Sydney, location Canberra, location New York. You could have classifications, security unclass, security protected, security in confidence. You could have, environment, dev, prod, test. You could have it based on cost. You could have it based on performance, high, medium, low performance. So you can have these tags applied to almost everything within vRealize Automation Cloud. Got to get used to saying that. And this is where this is how your storage gets allocated, your networks get allocated, your machines get allocated. So they're extremely important. So we'd give a capabilities tag at the top level. Obviously it will filter down. And that's the same for all the other ones. Azure, as well as vCenter. They're all the same here. I just got one there. I haven't put a capability tag on this one. Now, what we then have, let's go into, is cloud zones. So think of cloud zones as your reservations. Instead of having a one-to-one mapping as it previously did in other versions, you can have a many-to-one mapping, essentially. So cloud zones are equivalent to your reservations. So we have a look at our AWS one here. I've got more capabilities, so environment dev, platform AWS, cloud public, for instance. Then we got our placement policies. So by default, it's round robin, and then we've got pin back and spread as well. So I usually use it as default. I don't know really why you'd want to change any of those, but what that would do is if I have all these enabled, it will round robin across them. Now you can see you can even go even further. So I've got tags here, so AZ, A, B, and C. Now these could be for different things. Maybe C is for DR. So you could have DR true and the rest DR false, for instance. So you can even start seeing how you can build these tags and the relationships between them. And then you've got projects. So I'll go into that in just a second. So the cloud zones are the same everywhere except vCenter. You choose. I've got cloud private and platform vSphere there. You choose your folder and your placement policy, but then you also choose which reservation or cluster you want this to go into, right? Instead of availability zones like in public cloud. And again, projects. So then we move on to projects. So projects are equivalent to your business groups. It's just a logical construct where you can apply RBAC controls and other governance, right? So it doesn't have to be a project, but when you think about it, especially in my experience, is that most government agencies as well as private businesses generally spend money on a project basis, meaning that when you're consuming cloud and all the rest of it, it probably has a project link to the back end. So This is where we can have that, but it doesn't have to be project. It could be team, it could be department, it could be, company if you've got multiple subsidiaries underneath you. It could be a person. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But I know most of my customers will be using it on a per project basis generally. So if we have a look at a project, we've got our users. Now, I'm a lonely organization of one here, but you can have administrator or members. We can have our provisioning. So this is where you say this project can provision to. So I've got my 3 here, but maybe a project is a Windows 2019 upgrade project, right, for an enterprise. They might want to take advantage of the gazillion Azure credits that they have thrown in their ELA, right? So maybe they want to use Azure in the lower levels to make use of the MSDN credits. Maybe it's they're big workloads running 24/7, and it's cheaper to run on premise on vSphere. Or maybe it's just it's web based. You want to use Lambda or something else, something nice and cheap, and you use AWS. So this is where a business can make the decision on where a project should go, right? Because at the end of the day, people have their favorites, but you want to do the right thing by the business. Within here, we can resource tag everything, so everything deployed under this tag gets a project code tag. So everything deployed under this project gets a tag applied with project code. We can also have constraints. So these again are when we get into the deployments of a machine. This is where we can do constraints. So we want to do for instance, I could do network zone private. That means if someone tries to deploy a blueprint that they might have network zone public on there, this will override it. So the ones written in the project will override anything on a blueprint. Then we've got our custom properties. So these are things you can use for extensibility and all sorts of stuff and can't be overwritten. And then there's currently custom naming too. So within here you can use essentially anything that's available. Username, project, resource endpoints. So you can see here I've just got project name and my username, and then I add a couple of numbers at the end of it. Then we've got a timeout. So we can see here that they're all the capability tags for them. Now you can also do Kubernetes, so you can create a Kubernetes zone, essentially setting up a profile so they can do self-consumption of Kubernetes clusters. And then we have integrations. So we can see I've got 2 integrations here. So I've got the GitLab, and I'll go into integrations in a bit. This is where you can say, well, on this project, this is my GitLab repository for my blueprints and my extensibility, meaning that I don't even have to log into here to create the blueprints. They can all be created within GitLab or GitHub, for instance. And then we've got our AD domain. So AD is done through the Open FAS on-prem, and that's the integration. So that's only a recent addition. All right, so that's the project. So I'll discard that. Now what I'm going to do is go into integrations, since we're just talking about integrations there. So you can see I've got a whole bunch. OpenFAS is where you can run your Lambda equivalents, your Azure functions, but on-prem. And that's what actually the AD integration uses, that to connect to your on-prem AD. We've got VRO, obviously AD. I've got my GitLab personal, my GitHub personal, Puppet, PKS, and Ansible. So the current integrations are here. There's also IPAM, which I haven't got set up there, but they're all available. And if we have a look at, say, the GitLab, because I was talking about GitLab just before, we can see, again, you can put capability tags. I haven't. This will basically say, which GitLab do you want to go to. If you had multiples, we can see they're the repositories. We can see the histories of what's been updated, a few errors in there, and the GitLab personal. So it's just going GitLab, and I provided the token before. And then when you add the project to it, so if I go just quickly back to projects and go integrations, I can add another repository here. And I can do the repository branch folder and then the type. All right, so you can have multiple ones going at any given time within a project. So that's the integrations. Cloud proxies are for how you connect onto on-prem. So we've got the Cloud Assembly, and then we've got the Cloud Assembly Extensibility here, which is the newer one that's just been released to allow that OpenFAS work. All right, so let's have a look at flavors. So the great thing about CAS is that it's agnostic. I can have a single blueprint that deploys to AWS, Azure, GCP, and vSphere and never have to change a bit of code, right? All I'm changing is those capability tags, which is awesome. So to do that though, we've got to abstract a bit. So flavor mappings, for instance. Now, these can be anything you want. I've gone very original here with small, medium, large, but up to you how you carve it up. But what we can see here is I've got the three that I've got connected, Azure, AWS, and vCenter, and this is what small means to me. It's a standard A0, a T2 small. Now these grab these automatically, and you can search for the size that you want directly from the cloud providers. vSphere, you supply your own, obviously. So this is my t-shirt size here, right? So nice and easy. The exact same thing for image mappings. So I've only got one image mapping here, but you could have CentOS, Ubuntu, Windows 2016, Windows 2008 if you're still using it, Windows 2019, anything, right? Red Hat Enterprise, doesn't matter. And then you say, well, what is this image for this image name? So for this is what my CentOS is for me across the board. I've got a marketplace image here from Azure. I've got my own custom template here, and I've also got my own custom AMI here as well. But you can, I've just got a bit of a mixture there. You can do anything. Constraints, again, very simple. You can say, this is another idea of a capability tag. Maybe you want to place based on licensing, right? So you could say, not license Oracle or whatever. So you can say, well, if I've got a license tag of that, then I can't use this image. So you can put constraints around your images. What you can also do is put cloud config. So while you can do cloud config in a blueprint, and I'll get to that eventually, is that you can also put the cloud config within here, and it can't be overwritten. So for me, I'm just setting up a user, so I don't have to include that in the blueprints. But this is where you'd set up all your SOE level stuff that you don't want developers or anyone deploying to be able to override or change. So this is, this is your back office stuff, right? The Wintel, the server guys, they'll do what they need to do within here. On top of the existing image, right? And it can't be overwritten, so you can have that there. And that's how the flavors and images are abstracted. Now, network profiles and storage profiles, very similar to 7 either way, but let's have a look at vSphere here, for instance. So I've got a bunch of capability tags, and you can have tags, the same tag of different values too. So because I've got a bit of a consolidated lab going, I need to be able to test both. But we've got the networks. So these are my networks, the NSXT networks actually. What you can do within here is you can again tag these for capability tags. So you can see network zone app data. I've got network zone private there, and you can go into these and you can manage IP ranges. So this is equivalent to your inbuilt IPAM essentially. Like this is my address range from 10 to 99 there. I can have multiple ranges, but I can also click on these and set up the gateway and DNS and everything like that as well. And this is where I do the cloud and support public IP. Obviously, you probably could on vSphere if you've got public IP addresses, but in this instance I don't. So that's cool. Go network policies. So this is network policies for load balancers essentially, but we can go create on-demand networks. So I've got my transport zone, I've got my CIDR, the addresses, and dynamic. So this just means it's grabbing that IP address assignment from that pool that I want. But you can choose static or you can choose both if you want. And then we go, this is essentially my external network is my cloud deployment network, my logical router, and my cluster. So that's very NSX specific. Obviously, you can put in load balancers and add load balancers. So as you provision machines, load balancers will show up in here. And again, you could add and consume security groups as well. I'll discard that. From AWS and Azure, very similar. Again, I've got different capability tags there. I've got two networks. I've got a public and a private zone here. So this is my ones that can be internet facing essentially. Network policies, again, I can create on-demand networks and on-demand security groups. I haven't got them set up yet. And you can put your security group in there. Now, Azure, identical. I think I've only got one network if I remember correctly. Yeah, one network there. And again, I don't have any of those set up. But this is the network that I've got. You can go into that and get a bit more detail, support public IP and all the rest. Alright, so that's network profiles. You know, so you'd have different network profiles for prod, test, dev, apps. It doesn't really matter, right? And everything within vRealize Automation Cloud is API first. So anything I can do here, you can do through the API. I've got another video where I show the complete stand-up from start to finish, all automated. So I just click a button and 2 minutes later I had a full CAS with endpoints and network profiles and image mappings and everything. So you can check that video out if you want to have a look at that. So storage profiles, pretty much the same thing. Now I've only got two here. So we can see that for this instance, I've got AWS Dev. I've got GP2, but you got the choice of the usual AWS ones. Preferred storage, and you can see there I've got storage type SSD, for instance. So these are the capability tags I'm talking about. They're very, very important, and they're very easy to get mixed up. I think can't count the amount of hours I've spent why things haven't worked, and it's been because of a tag. And then AWS, not AWS, Azure, very similar thing. I've got Azure Dev, but obviously Azure, you've got managed disks and unmanaged disks. You got standard HD hard drives, which is just spinning Rust essentially, standard and premium, and you got OS caching, and you can see that storage type Rust, right? You can make these anything you want, and you can support encryption and do whatever you want. So that's the storage profiles. Now let's get on to cool stuff, which is the blueprinting. So blueprintings are great. So essentially you can see these ones that are linked up here, they're my GitLab. So everything under here, we've got blueprints. Now blueprints have to be in a very specific, so you've got to have them in a folder, and then within the folder you've got to have it called blueprint.yaml, right? Within that you've got the version, so this is how it's versioned within vRealize Automation Cloud, and this is the name that it gets. So they're important, and if we have a look at all the blueprints there, we've got the etcd one, for instance, it's blueprint.yaml as well. So they're all blueprint.yaml. If you have anything else, it'll error and won't pick it up. So they come through there, and if you click on these, you can actually see the git commit, and you can copy it and do all that sort of stuff, right? So let's have a look at a hello world. So this is my hello world equivalent within vRealize Automation Cloud. Now you can see it's just very simple. It's a network, cloud machine, and a load balancer. Now you can see I'm using on the side here cloud agnostic workloads. So what's great about this is obviously we've got our components down the left there, and we've got our design canvas, which so many people like about VRA, and then we've got our code, which is new to the next generation CMP we have here. So within here we can click on these or highlight that particular machine, and if we actually drag a machine over, for instance, it'll write that in automatically, and you can see as I can link it up, you'll see it start to fill out, saying that it depends on that, etc. Right? So let's just remove that for now. And again, you can delete it on there and away it goes. So I can, obviously I've got my resources, my machine, my network, and I've got my inputs. So you can see count, so this is just how many machines I want to provision, and then we've got platform string, and I've got these enums, which will just allow a drop down. But if we look at what I'm doing with those, is I've got these constraints here. So that's that capability tags. You can click on all these and it tells you what they should do. And I've got tag, and all I'm doing here is just manipulating it. So I've just got the tag's going to be platform, and it's going to be whatever I select from up here, which is AWS, Azure, vSphere. So very basic. It is a Hello World equivalent, and we can go deploy to this. I could go AWS demo, next, choose AWS, deploy that. Now that's going to go to the deployment screen, and I'll cover that in a bit, but I'm going to go back to blueprints. I'm just going to deploy that again. Now deploying directly from the canvas is great too. So I go to Azure, demo, deploy, close, and I will go vSphere demo. Oh. Awesome. So that is there deploying to all three clouds. Hopefully I choose Azure there. Yep, it's deploying to all three clouds, and it's deploying a load balance to all three clouds, it's deploying the machine, and it's putting it on a network. Now if you want to see how or where this goes or why it got chosen there, you can go to requests, and I can see the three requests going here. So I can go here, and it gives you once it generates, it gives you a visual of, you know, its network allocations and whatnot. So let's go machine allocation, because I really like this one. So we can see that this is my request, these are my constraints. I've got a hard Azure constraint there. This is the project, and these are the cloud zones I'm allowed to deploy to. Now we can see I've got the three here. Now the flavor is fine across all. The Azure, not the Azure, the image is fine across all, but this is where it fails down. So it said, you know, unmatched constraint, platform Azure, and it matched there. So that's where it goes, right? So it's really cool to be able to see. If you want to dive in further, you can go into dev mode and dive into every little thing that it goes through, and I'm not going to go into that right now. You can also export that as JSON if you want. So that's, you know, that's really cool. We look at, go back here. So they're all deploying. So the AWS one's finished. We can go into the AWS deployment. We can select the different components like this. We can look at our storage. We can look at our networks. We look at our custom properties, all the custom properties. So there's that project code, and that's the constraint tags. And what we can do is we've got our day 2 actions. So you can see we can add a disk, we can delete, power off, reboot, reset, resize, update, lots of cool stuff. So they're all available, and they're on different things. So if I go to the load balancer, I can reconfigure that load balancer. I can add in a new route for that load balancer, for instance. So this is all the day 2 lifecycle stuff. That's something that VRA has been very powerful at doing. All right, so that's the network. I don't know if there's no actions available on the network, and we've got our history. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this blueprint. I'm going to go, look, I want a machine, another one. It can be a part of that network, and within here we can see the image. So you could use an AMI, but that would obviously be making it specific. You could use a vSphere template, but that would be making it specific. So it will automatically autocomplete for the ones you've got. And I also want to we can see that it comes up with, what do I want? I want constraints, enter, I want the tag, enter, and I'm just going to hard code this, but from AWS, for instance. So that should be fine. So I've got another one there. I want to, well, let's check out my version history, for instance. So let's go version. I want to see a diff between version 1. We can see the diff in code. We can also diff it visually if we want to as well. We can release, unrelease, restore. But what I want to do is I go, yeah, I'm happy with this current draft. I want to deploy that, but instead of doing a new one, let's update an existing one, right? So let's go AWS demo. Yep. And it's going to tell me what it's going to do, which is great. So I go deploy, and it's going to do the difference, and we'll be able to see that happen here. So we've got 2 requests. Oh, there's our update, and that's going to go throughout the other machine and do what it needs to do. So it's immutable as well. We can update existing deployments by updating the blueprints and redeploying over the top of, right? So very, very, very cool. So what I will have a look at now is, for instance, let's do a new one. Let's go, YouTube demo. For instance, select a project, on allow. Let's create that. So what I'll do is I'll just grab some code. I'll just copy and paste it in there, and we'll see it draw up. So there's a good trusty old Spring Trader. Deploys multiple networks, load balancers, and installs all the apps. And we can see we've got our cloud config here running a particular workload. So we can have a complex blueprint, or we can have a simple one as I've just shown. So I'm going to close that one, and I'll delete that because I don't want it. But let's have a look at a couple others. So obviously fully supports Ansible as well. So Ansible integration, we can see here. We've got Ansible here. We've got OS type, prod. We want to use a key file to be able to connect. We want to provision these playbooks, but you can also deprovision as well. So what do you want to unprovision? You can run straight up commands. You can add them into groups. You can do all that stuff from here as well. And that's saying that it's assigned directly to these resources, and doesn't matter how many of these applied, it gets run against it. Right, so great if you've already want to use pre-existing Ansible investment that you've got there, and Puppet as well for config management. So Puppet, pretty much the same thing. You can say which role you want it to be a part of, and you can have these all dynamically created or inputted at deployment time, or however you want to do it, right? Now let's have a look, and I'll go back to Hello World. Let's have a look at what items we actually have here on the side. So we've got Cloud Agnostic, great, so I can deploy that anyway. We've got machine specific, so we've got vSphere specific and NSX specific. Then we've got AWS, but we can start consuming and dragging and dropping S3, Route 53, Redshift, RDS, Lambda, KMS, Kinesis, IAM, EMR, DB, and API Gateway. Awesome stuff. The configuration management, GCP, and then Kubernetes as well. What we can also do is all of the Azure stuff, so all the Azure machine, disk, and resource group, but then traffic manager, storage, SQL database server, Redis, search, Key Vault, DNS, functions, and app services. So we can actually start creating blueprints using all of these, and I actually have one. So if we have a look at, for instance, API Gateway here, this is an app using nothing but services. So we've got function, we're assigning permissions to that function, we've got our REST API, we've got our integration and our method, our deployment, and then our Route 53 record, right? So I can deploy this, for instance, go API, demo, next, That'll do. Cool. So that's off and deploying. Cool. So that's actually doesn't take very long at all to deploy all of them. And again, you can come in here, select on these, and you get everything that you want about it. So that's the blueprints. Now, blueprints can be submitted pretty much anyway, but you know, especially through CodeStream, it's got an IaaS API, so it can be very much like a OpenStack and create your stuff from scratch through the IaaS API across any of the clouds as well, which is great. But now we move on to extensibility. So extensibility, huge thing in VRA. It's what made it probably as popular as it was, because you could extend and do anything. And it's been improved in VRA 8, but in vRealize Automation Cloud. I'm going to get used to saying that. But it's been improved because you can still use your VRO workflows. Great, very powerful, and there's still reasons why you would use that. But there's also new actions. So you can take advantage of serverless. So Lambda, Azure Functions, or OpenFaaS on-prem. As we can see here, we've got, you know, create a CI in Snow, for instance. So this creates the CI in Snow. I've got my instance there. I'm choosing to run it in Amazon AWS for Lambda, but Azure on-prem, or I can go auto. But I've got Lambda specific client in here, so I want it to run on that. Again, it can be version stored in GitLab. You can write it directly here. You can import package. You can use Python or Node.js 6. I know the Node.js version's a bit old, but it supports running across all the functions, right? So hopefully we'll see them up as the other functions of service start improving, having the same version across all. But these are what we can use to do nice, quick actions, but we can also start chaining them together. So for instance, I've got this one here, which actually runs 2 Lambda functions, one after the other. So one is I get additional properties, because the properties compared to a VRA machine in VRA 8 or VRA vRealize Automation Cloud is that it's very lightweight. So in 7 you had a lot of information in your payload, you could do pretty much anything. It's a lot lighter in this version. So sometimes you may need to reach back in to vRealize Automation Cloud to get additional properties to be able to fill them up. So that's what I'm doing here. So I'm adding custom properties, I'm reaching in back into the service, you know, grabbing the data that I want, and then I'm pushing that into the properties and uploading it into Snow. So I'm doing one after the other here, but you can take that a bit further. So if I was to do a new action, let's go, assign it to a project. Next, we can go get rid of that, the template. So there's a bunch of templates here we can use, like tag VM and all the rest, but we can do like action flow, fork and join, meaning that we can start running actions in parallel. We can then join the properties, run another action, we can break out again. So just think of these as a light workflow, or workflow light, if you want to call it that. And where you would use these is just simple, like the Snow one. I just want to create it because I'm running a SaaS version of Snow. It's just nice and easy. REST API, boom, boom, boom. Where you still want to use VRO though, probably for those more complex integrations, especially since VRO can already have your endpoints configured, like your Active Directory endpoints, etc. Meaning that, you know, if I was to do that in an action, I'd have to write that logic myself from scratch, or use another third-party plugin and then having to write it anyway and keep it up to date. At least that way, with those sort of more complex endpoints, you can still use VRO to do all of that, right? I'll discard that. So this is very similar. We've got our event topics. So this is what we can subscribe to. Here we can go and have a look at the schemas if we want to, but then we've got our subscriptions. So for this instance, this add CI to CMDB is I'm doing this compute post provision. I'm doing a condition, so I want to make sure that I'm only running on my vSphere machines. This is purely for testing purposes. Obviously, you'd want to run it across all of them, but this was it's just saying that if my tags and my platform tag equals vSphere, then run this essentially, and I can say this runs on any project, or it can just be under a certain project, whatever it might be. So you can have very project specific, or you can have enterprise wide ones that you want. And that's it. So again, very, very, very powerful. You've now, instead of needing to know JavaScript and VRO, you can now, that's now broadened to Python, which is obviously very popular, and Node.js, which is very popular as well. While it's still JavaScript, it's not the same thing, right? So, it can extend your resource pool to be able to do some better stuff. And finally, there's a marketplace. Marketplace is just like any other marketplace. You can download blueprints and images and everything else that are available. Get you started. You need your My VMware account active to be able to grab that stuff. But hopefully this just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and better, right? Going forward. So that is pretty much everything. I'm gonna, if you haven't already seen it, I've got a bunch of other videos coming out that are just going to focus on very specific areas, nice, short, sharp. This is just a very large overview of what is possible, and I hope you enjoyed. See you around. Cheers, bye.